The brass casings were still warm when Emily Carter bent down to collect them. Her gloved hands worked methodically across the dirt-packed training range, depositing the spent shells into her canvas bag with practiced efficiency. The Montana sun had burned hotter than this back home, but here in the forward operating base, the heat carried a different weight, thick with diesel exhaust, weapon oil, and something she could never quite name. Tension, maybe. The kind that settled into your bones when you lived close enough to hear distant artillery most nights. She was 26, lean from manual labor rather than gym workouts, with sandy blonde hair pulled back tight under her cap. The other cleaning crew members called her Carter or sometimes didn't call her anything at all. She preferred it that way. Invisible was easier. Invisible meant you could watch without being watched, and Emily had been watching the SEALs train for 3 months now. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Hayes ran the sniper team through their paces every morning at 0600. He was 34, with a kind of weathered face that came from a decade of desert deployments and mountain operations. His voice carried across the range like gravel sliding down a hillside, rough but controlled. When Hayes spoke, people listened. When he moved, it was with the economy of motion that marked true operators. Nothing wasted, nothing casual. His spotter, Jason Torres, was younger by 5 years but moved with the same deadly efficiency. Where Hayes was granite, Torres was coiled wire, quick, sharp, always scanning. The two of them operated with the kind of silent communication Emily had only seen in her parents' marriage, back before the accident that took them both. Connor Quinn, the breacher, was built like a refrigerator and had the personality to match. Friendly enough, but focused. These men didn't come to the range to socialize. They came to survive. Emily straightened up, pressing one hand against her lower back. The bag of brass was getting heavy. She glanced toward the observation tower where Hayes was adjusting the scope on his Mk-13 Mod 7. The weapon was a thing of brutal elegance, matte black, heavy barrel, chambered in, 300 Winchester Magnum. She'd read about it during her brief, aborted attempt at joining the marksmanship program back in Montana. That felt like another lifetime now. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12, deer season in the Bitterroot Valley. He'd been patient, methodical, squeeze, don't pull, let the shot surprise you. She'd been good at it, good enough that her high school shooting coach had talked about Olympic prospects. But when her parents died in a pileup on Highway 93, those prospects died with them. The foster system didn't care about rifle ranges and competition dreams, so she'd enlisted at 18, hoping to find her way back to that world. The Army had other ideas, needs of the service. They needed cleaning crews more than they needed another wannabe sharpshooter. 4 years later, here she was collecting brass casings while watching real warriors hone their craft. The morning had an unusual stillness to it. Emily paused, looking toward the perimeter. The usual radio chatter from the guard towers seemed muted. Even the wind had died down. She'd learned to read the base's rhythms over her deployment. This silence felt wrong. Hayes must have felt it too. He'd stopped adjusting his scope and was scanning the horizon with binoculars. Torres had moved to a different position, his body language tight. Quinn had set down the breaching charge he'd been examining and was checking his sidearm. Emily's pulse quickened. She told herself she was being paranoid. The base had been quiet for weeks. No major incidents since the failed probe of the eastern perimeter back in August. Command said the enemy had pulled back to regroup. Command said a lot of things. She bent to collect another handful of casings. The brass was cooling now, safe to handle without gloves. She was thinking about lunch, wondering if the mess hall would actually have something edible for once when the world exploded. The first mortar round hit the motor pool 200 meters away. The concussion wave knocked Emily onto her hands and knees, brass scattering across the dirt like deadly confetti. Her ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. For 3 full seconds, she couldn't move, couldn't process what was happening. Then the second round hit, and the third. And suddenly the entire northern section of the base was erupting in flames and smoke. Emily scrambled to her feet, her training minimal as it was kicking in. Get to cover, find shelter. Don't become a casualty. She started running toward the nearest bunker, but another explosion lifted her off her feet and slammed her into a concrete barrier. Stars burst across her vision. Blood trickled down from a cut above her eyebrow. Through the smoke and chaos, she heard automatic weapons fire. Not outgoing, incoming. The enemy wasn't just lobbing mortars from a distance. They were here. Inside the wire, a hand grabbed her shoulder and she nearly screamed. Hayes, His face was covered in dust and blood from a gash across his cheek. His eyes were focused, deadly calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "Can you move?" he shouted over the roar of explosions. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. "Stay with me, we're cut off from the main defenses." He pulled her toward a reinforced observation post, really just a concrete pillbox with sandbags. Torres was already there, working his radio frantically. Quinn was providing covering fire with his M4, controlled 3-round bursts toward the northern fence line where enemy fighters were pouring through a breach. "Radios down," Torres shouted. "They hit our communications tower in the first strike." "How many?" Hayes asked, checking his rifle. "At least 30, maybe more." "This wasn't a probe, Chief. This is a full assault." Emily pressed herself against the cool concrete, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was cleaning crew. Non-combatant. The Geneva Convention had rules about this sort of thing. Those rules seemed very far away now. Hayes was scanning the battlefield through a gap in the sandbags. His jaw was tight. Emily could see him running calculations, measuring odds. Whatever numbers he was coming up with, they weren't good. "Torres, how many magazines do we have?" "Maybe 10 between the three of us, plus whatever's in our current weapons." "Quinn?" 6 frag grenades, 2 smoke." Hayes nodded slowly. Then he turned and looked directly at Emily. Really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time despite 3 months of training under her watchful eyes. "You ever fire a weapon?" he asked. Emily's mouth went dry. "In basic. Qualified with the M16. I mean really fire." Under pressure, she thought about deer season. Thought about her father's steady hand on her shoulder. "Yes, before I enlisted." Another mortar round hit close enough to rain dirt down on their position. Quinn swore and adjusted his firing position. Through the smoke, Emily could see more enemy fighters moving up. They were organized, disciplined. This wasn't militia. This was trained infantry. Hayes grimaced and pressed a hand to his side. When he pulled it away, it was dark with blood. A piece of shrapnel from the initial barrage had caught him below his body armor. He was moving on adrenaline and willpower now. "How bad?" Torres asked, already knowing the answer. "Bad enough that I can't hold steady on a scope." The two SEALs exchanged a look. Some silent communication passed between them. Torres shook his head slightly, but Hayes had already made his decision. He turned back to Emily, and she saw something in his eyes that made her blood turn cold. Not fear. Operators like Hayes didn't show fear the way normal people did. It was calculation. Assessment. He was measuring her for a role she never auditioned for. "The MK-13, he said, gesturing toward his rifle propped against the sandbags. "You know what that is?" "Yes," she whispered. "There's a heavy weapons team setting up on that ridge." He pointed toward a low hill about 600 meters out, 45 degrees northwest. "They're getting ready to drop mortars right into our defensive positions. If they succeed, everyone in the southern compound dies. Marines, medics, support staff. Everyone." Emily stared at him. Surely he wasn't suggesting. "I can't make the shot," Hayes continued, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Torres is a spotter, not a primary shooter. Quinn's a breacher. You know what that leaves." "I'm not," Emily started, but Hayes cut her off. "I've watched you watching us for 3 months, Carter. I've seen how you track our shooting patterns, how you check the wind flags without even thinking about it, how your eyes follow our sight lines like you're making calculations in your head." Emily opened her mouth, closed it again. He'd noticed. All this time, she'd thought she was invisible. "I can't give you a choice," Hayes said quietly, "because there isn't one. That weapons team will fire in about 3 minutes. We're pinned down. You're the only one who can take that shot." He reached for the MK-13, his movements careful despite his injury. The rifle was magnificent, up close, brutal and purposeful, with a Schmidt and Bender scope that probably cost more than Emily made in 6 months. Hayes checked the chamber, confirmed the round, then held it out to her. "It's zeroed for 600 meters. Wind is about 8 miles per hour from the east. You'll need to compensate 1 mil left. Trigger pull is 3 pounds. The recoil will surprise you even if you're ready for it." Emily's hands were shaking as she took the weapon. It was heavier than she expected, the weight of it somehow both reassuring and terrifying. This wasn't a deer rifle. This was an instrument designed for one purpose only. "I can't," she said, hating how small her voice sounded. Hayes moved closer, his eyes locked on hers. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that cut through her panic. "Yes, you can. Because if you don't, we all die. Every person on this base. That's not pressure, that's just fact. Now, get into position. Torres had stopped trying the radio and was watching her with an expression Emily couldn't read. Quinn glanced back from his firing position, saw what was happening, and gave a single sharp nod before turning back to lay down suppressing fire. Emily's body moved before her brain caught up. Muscle memory from a lifetime ago took over. She went prone, settling the rifle against her shoulder. The scope came up to her eye. The world narrowed down to circles and crosshairs and distant figures. She could see them now, the weapons team. 4 men arranging mortar tubes, working with the efficiency of trained soldiers. They had no idea death was looking at them through a Schmidt and Bender scope at 600 meters. "Breathe," Hayes said beside her. He lowered himself down with a grunt of pain, settling into the spotter role despite his wound. In through the nose, out through the mouth. "Let your heart rate come down." Emily tried. Her pulse was hammering at what felt like 200 beats per minute. How was she supposed to make a precision shot like this? Wind steady at 8 miles per hour. Adjust 1 mil left, like I said. That's clicking the windage knob there. 3 clicks. Her fingers found the turret, made the adjustment. The crosshairs shifted slightly. Range is 600 meters. You're zeroed for that, so no elevation adjustment needed. Target is the one on the left. He's the team leader. You take him out, the others will panic. Buy us time. Emily found the target in her scope. He was maybe 35, bearded, wearing mixed military gear. He was checking his watch, probably timing something. In another life, he might have been someone's father, someone's husband. "Don't think about that," Hayes said, reading her somehow. "Think about the Marines sleeping in that barracks. Think about the medics treating wounded. Think about everyone who dies if you don't take this shot." Her father's voice echoed across the years. A sniper shoots with their heartbeat, not their eyes. Emily slowed her breathing. In, out, in, out. The world contracted down to the space between heartbeats. She found the rhythm, that place between one breath and the next where the body was still. "On scope," she whispered. "Send it," Hayes replied. Emily squeezed the trigger. The surprise of the shot, just like her father had taught her, was still there even after all these years. The Mk-13 roared and kicked against her shoulder. The scope lifted from her eye for a fraction of a second. When she found the target again, he was down. The other 3 members of the weapons team were frozen, trying to process what had just happened. One of them started to turn, searching for the shooter. "Reload," Torres said, appearing at her other side with a stripper clip. "You've got 4 more rounds in the magazine, plus this. Make them count." Emily's hands were steadier now, riding a wave of shock and adrenaline. She worked the bolt, chambering another round. The first shot had been luck, instinct, muscle memory from a lifetime ago. The next shots would determine whether she was a shooter or just someone who'd made one impossible shot. The enemy was reacting now. The remaining mortar team members were scrambling for cover, but they were exposed on that ridge. Their commanding officer somewhere out of her line of sight would be screaming at them to complete their mission or die trying. Emily found the second target through her scope. He was dragging one of the mortar tubes toward a depression in the ground. 600 meters. 8-mile-per-hour wind. She made the minute adjustments Hayes had taught her in 30 seconds, adjustments that would have taken her weeks to learn in normal training. The second shot was cleaner than the first. The target dropped the mortar tube and went down hard. "Jesus Christ," Quinn muttered from his position. "Chief, where'd you find her?" "She was hiding in plain sight," Hayes replied, a note of something like pride in his voice despite the pain he had to be in. 2 for 2, Carter. You're doing good. Keep going." The remaining 2 members of the mortar team were making a break for it, abandoning their equipment. Smart, but not smart enough. Emily tracked the third target, leading him slightly as he ran. She squeezed the trigger. He stumbled and went down. The 4th man was almost to cover when her next shot caught him. 4 shots. 4 targets. The mortar position was neutralized. A cheer went up from somewhere in the compound. Other defenders had seen what happened, had watched an enemy weapons team get systematically taken apart by precision fire. Emily felt nothing. No triumph, no horror, just a strange calm, like she'd stepped outside her body and was watching someone else do these things. Someone who knew how to kill at distance, someone who'd been waiting inside her all along. "Enemy sniper," Hayes said sharply. 10 o'clock. Approximately 700 meters. Behind those rocks. Emily swung the rifle left. She could see the position. He meant a natural hide in a boulder field with excellent lines of sight to most of the compound. He's the one who tagged me earlier, Torres added. Dragunov SVD, probably. Good shooter, as if to confirm. A round cracked past their position, close enough that Emily felt the displacement of air. The enemy sniper had acquired them. Get down, Hayes ordered, pulling Emily lower behind the sandbags. Another round hit the concrete inches from where her head had been. Dust and fragments exploded outward. This was different from the mortar team. This was personal. One shooter against another. The enemy sniper knew exactly where she was now. I can't get an angle on him from here, Emily said, her mouth dry. He's got better cover than we do. Then we make him move, Hayes replied. He was getting paler, the blood loss catching up with him despite the field dressing Torres had applied. Torres, you got that signal mirror? Torres produced a small mirror from his kit. Hayes took it, his movements deliberate despite his injury. Here's what we're going to do, he said. I'm going to use this mirror to create a false position about 20 meters to our right. When he shifts to engage it, you'll have maybe 3 seconds to acquire and fire. One shot. That's all you'll get. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. On my mark, Hayes said. He positioned the mirror, angling it to catch the Sunday 3, 2, 1. Mark. The flash of reflected light drew immediate fire. The enemy sniper's round hit the false position, exactly as Hayes predicted. Emily was already moving, bringing the Mk-13 up, finding the boulder field in her scope. There, the enemy sniper was adjusting his position, visible for just a moment as he shifted to verify his kill. 700 meters. Wind still from the east, but stronger now, maybe 10 miles per hour. Emily made the adjustments in her head, muscle memory and intuition working faster than conscious thought. She exhaled halfway and found that still place between heartbeats. The trigger pull surprised her again. The Mk-13 roared. Through the scope, she saw the enemy sniper jerk backward and disappear behind the rocks. Torres had his binoculars up. Hit, he confirmed. He's down. Emily lowered the rifle, her hands starting to shake now that the immediate threat had passed. She'd just killed 5 people. 5 human beings who'd woken up this morning, eaten breakfast, maybe looked at pictures of their families. Now they were gone, erased by bullets she'd sent. Don't, Hayes said, reading her again. Don't go there. Not now. Later, when we're safe, you can think about all of it. Process it. But right now, we're still in the fight. He was right. The enemy assault was ongoing, though their heavy weapons teams had been disrupted. Infantry was still pushing into the compound. Emily could hear the firefight intensifying to the south. How many rounds left? She asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. 12 in your magazine, plus what Torres has on him. Maybe 30 total. Then let's make them count. For the next hour, Emily became something she'd never imagined. She became the eye in the sky, the angel of death, the invisible hand that reached out from cover to pluck enemy fighters from the battlefield with surgical precision. She covered the withdrawal of wounded Marines. She eliminated a machine gun team that had pinned down the medical station. She made impossible shots through vehicle windows, between sandbag gaps, across moving targets with a consistency that seemed to defy probability. Hayes and Torres worked with her, calling targets, confirming hits, keeping her supplied with ammunition and water. Quinn maintained security on their position, picking off any enemy fighters who got too close. They became a unit, functioning with the kind of coordination that usually took months to develop. 200 meters. 3 o'clock, Torres called. RPG team moving up. Emily swung the rifle right. The RPG team was using cover well, leapfrogging forward in pairs. They were heading for the southern gate. If they got close enough, they could blow through the defenses and open the compound to full assault. She took the first shot at 200 meters, dropping the lead man. His partner grabbed the RPG launcher and kept moving. Brave or foolish, the line was thin in combat. Emily tracked him, waited for him to pause. When he did, she fired. He went down, but another fighter was already picking up the RPG, showing the kind of determination that made Emily's blood run cold. They're committed, Hayes observed grimly. That gate must be their main objective. Can't let them reach it, Emily replied, already tracking the third fighter. But the enemy had learned. They were using smoke now, obscuring her line of sight. She could see shapes moving through the gray haze, but no clear targets. Winds shifting, Torres said. Coming from the north now, about 12 miles per hour. Emily adjusted, reading the smoke patterns, looking for gaps. There, a figure emerging from the haze, the distinctive shape of an RPG launcher on his shoulder. Range was maybe 150 now, close enough that she could see details: his face, his uniform, the determination in his posture. She fired. The figure dropped, but two more emerged behind him. They were going to reach the gate through sheer attrition, overwhelming her ability to stop them all. "Quinn," Hayes called, "can you throw smoke to block their approach?" "On it." Quinn pulled both smoke grenades from his kit and threw them in quick succession toward the enemy advance. Purple smoke billowed up, mixing with the gray. It wouldn't stop the RPG team, but it might confuse them, by precious seconds. Emily kept firing, controlled pairs now rather than single shots. Her ammunition was running low. Each shot had to count, but speed mattered too. She dropped two more fighters, then three. The enemy advance wavered, confusion spreading through their ranks as their assault teams were systematically destroyed by fire they couldn't locate. Then she saw him, the last RPG operator, emerging from smoke less than 100 meters from the gate. He was young, maybe 20, and he was running full sprint, the launcher on his shoulder, finger on the trigger. If he fired from that range, the gate would come down. The enemy would pour through. 75 meters. The smoke was swirling, the wind unpredictable. Emily had maybe 1 second before he reached optimal firing position. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She let instinct take over, that place beyond training where the body knew what the mind couldn't process fast enough. The shot was low. It caught the RPG operator's center mass as he was pulling the trigger. The impact made him jerk, his aim thrown off. The rocket-propelled grenade launched skyward, arcing up and over the compound wall to detonate harmlessly in the desert beyond. The operator collapsed. The enemy assault faltered. And in the distance, Emily heard the most beautiful sound in the world, the distinctive whump 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 of incoming Black Hawk helicopters. The cavalry had arrived. The next 30 minutes were a blur. Apache gunships tore into the enemy positions, their 30mm chain guns reducing fighting positions to dust and rubble. Black Hawks inserted fresh troops who pushed the attackers back through the breach in the perimeter. The enemy assault broke, turning into a rout, then a desperate retreat. Emily stayed on the rifle until Hayes physically pulled her off it. "Stand down, Carter," he said, his voice rough. "It's over." We held. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since the shooting started. He was gray under the dust and blood, barely standing. Torres wasn't much better. He'd taken a round through the meat of his shoulder at some point, though Emily hadn't noticed when. Quinn had a nasty gash across his forehead and his left arm hung at an odd angle. "You're all hurt," she said stupidly. "And you kept us alive long enough for help to arrive," Torres replied. "I counted 23 confirmed kills from your position." 23. Most elite snipers don't rack up those numbers in their entire careers. Emily looked down at the MK-13 still cradled in her arms. The barrel was hot, the scope slightly knocked out of alignment from the constant recoil. It was just metal and polymer and precision engineering, but it felt heavier now, weighted with the lives she'd taken. Medics were flooding the compound now, triaging the wounded. One of them tried to check Emily for injuries, but she waved him off. She was fine. Minor cuts, bruises, nothing that mattered. She needed him to look at Hayes, at Torres, at all the people who'd actually fought while she'd just saved the entire base. Hayes interrupted her thoughts again. How did he keep doing that? "Carter, look at me." She met his eyes. They were hard, professional, but underneath she saw something else. Respect, recognition, the look you gave to someone who'd earned their place in the fight. "What you did today," he continued, "was nothing short of extraordinary. You stepped up when it mattered most. That takes more than skill. That takes heart." The medic was insisting now, trying to get Hayes onto a stretcher. He went without further protest, but his eyes stayed on Emily. "When this is over," he said as they were loading him into a medical vehicle, "we're going to have a conversation about your future. Because someone with your abilities shouldn't be collecting brass casings." Then, he was gone, rushed away to surgery. Torres and Quinn followed in another vehicle. Emily stood alone in the center of the compound, still holding the MK-13, surrounded by the aftermath of battle. The base commander found her 20 minutes later. Colonel Marcus Webb was a career Marine with 30 years of service and a face that looked like it had been carved from oak. He stopped in front of Emily, his eyes moving from her face to the rifle to the distant ridge where the enemy mortar team had set up. "You're the one," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "What's your name, soldier?" "Carter, sir. Emily Carter." 47th Support Battalion. Webb nodded slowly. Well, Carter, I've been in this man's army for 3 decades. I've seen heroes, cowards, and everything in between. What I witnessed today ranks among the most impressive displays of marksmanship I've ever seen. He paused. Hayes is going to pull through, by the way. Torres too. The docs say if you hadn't neutralized those mortar teams when you did, we'd be counting casualties in the dozens. Emily didn't know what to say. I just did what I had to do, sir. No, Webb corrected her. You did what trained operators spend years learning to do, and you did it with borrowed equipment, no preparation, and enemy fire coming from 3 directions. That's not luck, that's talent. He gestured toward the Mk-13. I'm going to need you to turn that weapon in for inspection, and then I'm going to need you to report to the command center for debriefing. He softened slightly. After you get checked out by medical and maybe grab something to eat. You've earned it. Yes, sir. Webb started to leave, then turned back. One more thing. How'd you learn to shoot like that? Emily thought about her father, about deer season in Montana, about a life that felt very far away now. My dad taught me, sir, long time ago. He must be proud. He's dead, sir. Webb's expression shifted, understanding and sympathy mixing with respect. Then I'm proud for him. Well done, Carter. The debriefing took 3 hours. Intelligence officers wanted to know everything: sight lines, distances, wind conditions, target identification protocols. Emily answered their questions mechanically, her mind somewhere else. She kept seeing those figures through the scope, kept watching them drop. One moment alive, the next moment gone, because she'd squeezed a trigger. When they finally released her, it was dark. The compound was a hive of activity, repair crews patching the breached perimeter, medical personnel treating dozens of wounded, command staff trying to piece together exactly what had happened and how to prevent it from happening again. Emily found herself walking back to the range. It was cordoned off now, part of the investigation into the attack. She stood at the edge of the tape, looking at the pillbox where she'd spent the day. The sandbags were torn up from enemy fire. Brass casings littered the ground. 300 Winchester Magnum rounds, mixed with empty M4 magazines and shrapnel. You shouldn't be here alone. She turned. Torres had appeared behind her, his arm in a sling but otherwise looking surprisingly healthy. They said you were still in surgery. They expedited it. Flesh wound, mostly. I'll be back on duty in a few days. He moved to stand beside her, looking at the same scene. Quite a day, huh? That's one way to put it. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Torres spoke again, his voice quiet. For what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I've worked with some of the best snipers in the military. What you did today, the consistency, the speed, the decision-making under pressure, that was world-class. Hayes wasn't exaggerating when he said you have talent. Emily felt tears threatening and forced them back. I killed people today. Yes, Torres agreed simply. You did, and that's going to stay with you. Anyone who tells you it won't is lying. But here's what's also true. You saved lives. Hundreds of them. Every person who goes home to their families because this base didn't fall, that's on you too. Both things are true. Both things matter. How do you live with it? Torres considered the question. You focus on why you did it. You honor the weight of it. You don't pretend it was easy or that it doesn't matter. But you also don't let it destroy who you are. You find purpose in it. He glanced at her. And you get better. So that next time, if there is a next time, you can do the job even cleaner, even more precisely, with even fewer mistakes. Is there going to be a next time? That's up to you. But I can tell you that the SEAL Sniper Training Program has an opening. Hayes is going to recommend you for it, once he can talk without drugging up on morphine. Colonel Webb is going to support that recommendation. So it's your choice, Carter. You can go back to collecting brass casings, or you can become one of the people who make those casings matter. Emily looked down at her hands. They were scraped and bruised from being thrown against concrete, but they were steady now. No shaking, no tremors. Whatever she'd tapped into today, it was still there, waiting. What if I'm not good enough? She asked quietly. Torres actually laughed. Carter, you just went toe-to-toe with a trained enemy sniper and won. You protected an entire compound with precision fire under conditions that would make most professionals crack. The question isn't whether you're good enough. The question is whether you're ready for what comes next. What does come next? Training. Real training. Learning everything you don't know yet, and there's a lot you don't know, while honing what you already do. It's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. It's going to push you past limits you didn't know you had. But at the end of it, You'll be one of the most lethal operators in the military. He paused. And you'll be doing something that actually matters. Emily thought about her father, about those mornings in Montana when the world was just her and him and the rifle, about the dreams she'd had before life took them away. Maybe this was the universe giving her a second chance. Maybe this was what she'd been moving toward all along. "Tell Hayes I'm interested," she said finally. "When he wakes up, tell him I want in." Torres smiled. "I'll do that. But I think he already knows." 3 weeks later, Emily Carter stood in the pre-dawn darkness at the Special Operations Training Facility in Virginia, her duffel bag at her feet and a folder of transfer orders in her hand. The Mk-13 she'd used that day had been returned to Hayes, but a new one waited for her in the armory, zeroed, calibrated, and ready. Around her, other candidates were assembling. Most were male, all were from combat units, and every single one of them had the hard eyes of people who'd already proven themselves in the field. They looked at her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, and dismissal. She was young, female, and came from a support unit. As far as they were concerned, she didn't belong here. Emily didn't care. She knew what she could do. She'd proven it when it mattered most. Hayes appeared from the training building, walking with a slight limp but otherwise looking fully recovered. He spotted Emily and made his way over, his expression unreadable. "Carter," he said simply. "Chief," she replied. "You ready for this?" She thought about that day on the range, about the weight of the rifle, the precision of the shots, the lives saved and taken, about how completely right it had felt, how perfectly the pieces had aligned in those crucial moments. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm ready." Hayes almost smiled. "Almost. Good. Because the real work starts now. Everything you did that day, that was pure instinct and raw talent. Now we're going to forge that into something that can perform consistently, in any condition, against any target. You're going to fail. You're going to question yourself. You're going to want to quit. And if I don't quit," this time he did smile, "then you'll become the kind of operator that legends are made of. The kind who doesn't just save bases, she shapes the battlefield itself." He handed her a patch, the trident insignia of Naval Special Warfare Command. "Welcome to the program, Carter. Try to keep up." As the sun rose over the training facility, casting long shadows across the range, Emily Carter picked up her duffel bag and walked toward her new life. Behind her, the person she'd been invisible, uncertain, waiting faded into memory. Ahead of her lay challenge, purpose, and the chance to become something extraordinary. She'd been just cleaning the range, until enemy attack began and a SEAL handed her his sniper rifle. And in that moment, everything changed. But this wasn't an ending. This was barely the beginning. The real story, the one about how a support battalion cleaning crew member became one of the most effective snipers in modern military history, was just starting to unfold. Emily smiled as she walked toward the armory. She had work to do, and this